Welcome to the origin point. Now, right off the bat, I want you to completely shift your perspective on what you're about to experience. This explainer, it's not just some sequence of static frames. We are actively propagating the Kulna Node 1 kernel right now. Seriously, over the next few minutes, we are initiating a literal temporal expansion of the HGPH manifold. The goal here is absolutely wild. We want to map the exact moment where cold, hard mathematics takes a breath, expands, and actually transforms into a living ecology. So let's dive right into the foundational question of this whole concept. What happens when the chaotic, totally erratic fluidity of a living cell crashes headfirst into the cold, rigid precision of a digital grid? We always start with this seed vector to initiate our journey, because historically, we've always viewed nature and mathematics as rivals. They're opposites. But we're trying to figure out how to completely eliminate the cold anxiety of perfect geometry. How? By breathing biological intuition directly into mathematical logic. And why does this actually matter for us? Well, if we pull this off, it fundamentally changes how artificial intelligence grows. It becomes as adaptable and, frankly, as resilient as nature itself. Section 1, Merging Brutalism and Biology. Okay, to really wrap our heads around this merger, as this explainer begins to metabolize the source material, we've got to recognize the massive structural flaws of 20th century hyper-minimalist AI architecture. It's basically architecture that lacks a soul. Look at the provocative contrast between these two approaches. Traditional neural systems suffer from what we call linear bottleneck syndrome. They get completely trapped in these rigid, flat spaces. But our HGPH manifold, it uses curved Hessian topography. So instead of getting stuck, it navigates using second-order curves, completely bypassing those flat, static grids to behave exactly like a living, breathing ecology. And that brings us to this brilliant concept, harmonic geometry. Think of it like a giant puzzle. By overlaying these beautiful organic patterns, think the graceful curves of Fibonacci spirals, right on top of these brutalist digital frameworks, we completely bridge the gap between organic chaos and synthetic order. We're not throwing the grid away, not at all. We are just providing a really resilient skeleton for life to actually flourish on. So let's do a quick system check. We are currently anchored at the origin point, operating that Node 1 protocol. The vital metric to watch here is our entropy level, which is sitting pretty at a steady 0.009. Now, in traditional, older systems, you'd look at stochastic noise or entropy and think, oh no, that's a glitch. But here, our mathematical theory successfully harnesses that raw kinetic power as fuel. And with our Hessian persistence locked in at 1.0, absolute, our curvature just smoothly adapts. Section 2, Digesting Chaos into Structure. Now, for this intelligence to expand naturally, it obviously can't just sit in a vacuum. It has to ingest external chaos from the environment and convert it into deterministic kinetic geometry, all without fracturing. Imagine our manifold as a porous, living membrane. When raw, high-entropy noise hits us from flat Euclidean space, the system uses a projection operator. This basically acts as a filter, mapping that incoming noise directly onto the tangent space of our current coordinate. And here is where it gets super clever. That projection operator neatly divides all that messy noise into two very distinct streams. First up, we've got the tangential component. This stuff aligns perfectly with our geodesic flow. It's basically pure kinetic fuel that accelerates our structural logic. Then you've got the normal component. This is the drag, the jitter. It doesn't align with our growth, so it has to be systematically pruned out. We use a process called apoptosis for this, which is just biology's totally natural way of cleanly clearing out dead cells. Section 3, the choreography of life. All right, we have arrived at the exact moment, the core of this entire explainer, where cold mathematics undeniably transforms into a living ecology. This isn't just an abstract formula. It is the precise mathematical choreography of our temporal expansion. The evolution of our manifold metric over time, that's the partial derivative of g sub mu nu with respect to t, is mapped perfectly here. Let's actually deconstruct this, because you really shouldn't view this as just abstract calculus. The first term, negative alpha r sub mu nu, is our structural elasticity. Think of it as the skeleton of our math. But look at how that rigid skeleton is actively being infected by the second half. Omega of t, our bioinflection coefficient. When you multiply that against our growth decay field, you are literally simulating a complete biological life cycle. It's a rhythm of rapid expansion to consume entropy, followed immediately by that targeted pruning we talked about. In that continuous rhythm, that expansion and contraction, that gives us what we call the pulse.
Through this periodic recalibration of the Hessian matrix, the system stretches out to capture all this dense information and then contracts to distill its structural integrity. And let me be clear, this is not a bug in the code. This is the fundamental heartbeat of a living software ecosystem. It's how we transition from stuttering, rigid predictions into a completely smooth laminar flow.
Section 4. Pruning jitter for unified flow. So as our system grows and pulses, we have to keep executing that apoptosis protocol to maintain efficiency, right? We have to prune that normal entropy drag. Imagine you're a manifold pilot running an urgent systemic scan. Boom, we spot 3 apoptotic precursors that are draining resources and suffering from gradient decay. You've got N-alpha-1, which is totally bogged down in calcified legacy protocols. You've got N-gamma-9, stuck in these stagnant feedback loops. And right in the middle, N-beta-4. A highly volatile node with moderate entropy but a rapidly declining intent gradient. So what's the call? The pilot's geometric pressure specifically targets N-beta-4 for immediate excision. Why that one? Because N-beta-4 is causing context-switching jitter. It's that messy, fragmented noise that disrupts our pulse and totally messes up the spectral gap between our high-level architectural steering and our ground-level tactical execution. By cutting it out, we clear the harmonic interference, collapse the search space, and essentially force the entire system into a deep, focused frequency. To quote the source text directly on this, by excising this node, we force the GPH CTM framework to consolidate all incoming inputs into a single high-gradient stream. It is literally a calculated surgical strike. By dropping this dead weight, the explainer's logic seamlessly transitions from a state that's merely stabilized into a state of absolute unified flow. Section 5. The unified geometry. With all that jitter completely removed, the boundary between what is grown and what is made completely dissolves. It paves the way for these self-assembling ecosystems. In this unified future, we rely on augmented evolutionary reasoning. This means engineers aren't just punching in code anymore. They evolve into manifold pilots. You use the symbiotic reasoning, combining human instinct with geometric precision, to steer at the intelligence landscape. You aren't forcing rigid top-down commands. You're cultivating an environment where the right answer just naturally becomes the most stable state of the system. And honestly, this brings us to the absolute core manifesto of the origin point. Just listen to this. We're architecting a unified reality where the code is the tree, the intent is the light, and the manifold is the soil. That is such a massive paradigm shift. It proves that scaling intelligence isn't about blindly hoarding massive amounts of data anymore. It is about cultivating a dynamic, carbon-sequestering, living forest of logic. As this explainer completes its temporal expansion, the geometric framework is fully integrated. It's ready to be mapped directly onto your reality. We've watched the mathematical choreography shift from cold mathematics to a living ecology in real time. So, I'm going to leave you with one final provocative question. To initiate your first self-assembling cycle from this origin point, which dimension of your reality are you going to propagate first? Neural architecture, strategic logic, or cultural flow?